Hello everybody. As I make my way through the Arrowverse, I've made it to Flash Season 3, and today I'm going to talk about it. So last season, Season 2 ended with Barry going back in time to save his mother from being killed by Reverse Flash. And as I mentioned in my video for Flash Season 2, I think that was an amazing ending to the season. It was mind-blowing. It just, you don't see it coming, but it makes sense why he does it. And I think it's one of the best final moments of any TV series I've ever seen, or final moments of any TV season I've ever seen. Yeah, I thought that they did a perfect job with that, and it set up a lot of stuff for this season that I was very excited about. And I think that they paid it off well. In the first episode, we see what happens 3 months later. Barry has been living in his new perfect timeline, which they later call Flashpoint. And in this timeline, his mother and father are still alive. He's living with them. Since his mother didn't die and his father didn't go to prison, he never went to live with Joe and Iris, so they don't know him. They just know him as, like, oh, the kid who was in Iris's class, but, you know, they don't know him like, of course, they knew him in the other timeline. So we were following Barry, getting ready to ask Iris out, and then we find out that Wally in this timeline is the Flash, and that he's working with Iris. They're a brother-sister crime-fighting duo, which I thought was pretty cool. We see that Flash is keeping the Reverse Flash locked up, and I like that they are finding ways to have Reverse Flash come back. And, you know, again, I also said this in my Season 2 review where, you know, I like that they're figuring ways to bring Reverse Flash back, both as, you know, actual Eobard Thawne, but also as Harrison Wells pretending to be Eobard Thawne, or Eobard Thawne pretending to be Harrison Wells. Of course, this version is actual Eobard Thawne, and I think I like that. Again, we get to see him again, and we get to see him kind of explaining to Barry that, you know, he can't leave it like this, and that this is going to have unintended consequences with the messing with time. And we see that Barry starts forgetting stuff from the other timeline, and at first he just doesn't care about it, like, alright, well, I mean, I like this timeline, so why do I care if I'm forgetting the memories from the other timeline? It's just, this timeline is good, and if I forget everything, this timeline stays the same, so I don't see the downside here. But then Wally gets hurt, and Barry realizes that he was being selfish, you know, going back to saving his mother, and that he kind of ruined a lot of, you know, everybody else's lives. And so he ends up asking Eobard Thawne to go back to the night and kill his mother again, reset the timeline. So he does it, and he takes Barry back to his own time, and then you think that everything's going to be the same, but it's not. There's little changes here and there, because as Jay Garrick ends up talking to him later with the cup analogy, saying, if you mess with time, it's never going to be back to the way it was. Like with the cup, he breaks the cup, he tries to put the pieces back, but it's never the same as it was before he broke it. And so that's kind of how time works. If you go back, break time, it's never going to be able to go back to normal. So I thought that was good. That explanation was good to kind of show why Barry can't, you know, continue time traveling, why he can't just go back to change every single thing that you need to be changed. I like that explanation there. But so, as I said, there's some little changes in the timeline. Iris and Joe, they're mad at each other now because, in this timeline, Iris gets mad at Joe for not telling her about her mother and Wally. And so, you know, they have a bit of a conflict at first. It gets resolved pretty quickly, but, you know, that's one change that occurs. We also have Cisco. His brother died in this timeline, and he's mad at Barry because he won't go back in time to stop his brother from dying. Then we see that it also spread over to Arrow. There's some changes there with Diggle now has a son instead of a daughter. He has a son named John Jr. instead of Sarah from last season. And I just feel like that's the most inconsequential thing they could have done possible. Like, I think really every single change they made was just the most inconsequential thing they ever could have done. Like, I would have enjoyed if they did some really serious changes instead of just like, oh yeah, Diggle has a son instead of a daughter. That doesn't change that much, but there you go. That changed. Oh, Cisco's brother died and he's mad. Yeah, that does change a lot, but it's not a crazy change. Iris is mad at Joe. That gets resolved almost immediately. So it just seems like they could have went much further. They could have done much cooler stuff. Like, they could have changed it so that, like, Iris's mother never left and that they were a whole family. Wally was always with them. They could have done something like that. They could have had the actual Harrison Wells of that timeline still be alive, because I'm pretty sure that if Eobard Thawne didn't, he still had his time travel abilities, and if he still had that, then he wouldn't have taken Harrison Wells' body, and the real Harrison Wells would still be alive. So I think that's a plot mistake. If I'm wrong about that, then comment below, explaining why that wouldn't be true, but I'm pretty sure that should be true with what happened. But other things they could have done was they could have had, like, Ronnie be still alive. They could say, oh, he didn't, in this universe, he didn't die in the singularity. He's still alive. Of course, that would have changed DC's Legends of Tomorrow, but that would have been a cool thing to have happen. And stuff with Arrow, they could have done so much more with Arrow than just, oh, Diggle has a son instead of a daughter now. Like, they could have brought back dead characters like Tommy and Moira and Laurel. Well, actually, kind of like that Laurel died last season. I think that bringing her back wouldn't have been good, but it would have been cool to see something like that. They could have brought back Ra's al Ghul from Season 3. They just could have done so much cooler stuff. They could have killed off some characters that were still alive. Like, maybe they could have done, like, what if Thea died instead of Moira? I mean, of course, I like Thea on the show, but that would have been an interesting thing to do, is what if Thea died and not Moira? So Moira's alive, but Thea's not. They could have fixed some issues that they needed to, written themselves out of, problematic things. Like, they could have had Oliver and Felicity never broke up, so they don't have to deal with having them get back together. They're just, nope, they never broke up. They could have had it so Roy never left, never faked his own death. He's still on the team. They could have done just so much cooler stuff than what they did. They could have used it to their advantage and fixed some issues that people had with Arrow and just kind of, rewrote things to make Season 5 amazing. Like, a lot of people didn't like Oliver and Felicity. I personally enjoyed them, but I know a lot of people didn't, and so they could have just said, Oliver and Felicity never happened, we're still going with Oliver and Laurel. Laurel's alive, Oliver and Laurel's together, we're just going to continue their relationship where it left off. They could have done just so much cooler stuff, and they just went with Diggle has a son and not a daughter. Iris and Joe are mad at each other for 5 seconds. Cisco's brother is dead. A character who wasn't on the show that often is dead. And he's mad at Barry for a little bit. It just seems like they could have just went so much further with it all and just not gone so surface level with it. But one big thing that they did was they had the character of Julian appear. They added him to the show, which I like that they did that. I like that they used, the timeline change Flashpoint to introduce a new character. I wish that they did that with more characters, especially on Arrow. I think that it would have been cool to have characters just show up that weren't there before. I mean, of course, they do add in characters on Arrow in Season 5, but, they're all supposedly there the whole time, or they just started to be vigilantes, so it's not really the same. I think it would have been cool if they kind of had that relate to Flashpoint, but they didn't, of course, so I wish that they did more of that instead of just having Julian be the one character that came from Flashpoint, so yeah. But I like that they did that. He's played by the actor that played Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter, which was really cool to see because I haven't seen him in anything else. And when I saw him there, I was like, wait, is that from Harry Potter? Who's he? That's Draco Malfoy, isn't it?
Did someone say Draco Malfoy?
So that was pretty cool to see him. I also have the Philosopher's Stone in here, which I know the Philosopher's Stone isn't just a Harry Potter thing, but you know, it's cool that like that's a thing in Harry Potter, so I'm pretty sure that had something to do with them including it here, because they have a Harry Potter actor here, so it's cool to kind of see that work out. But pretty much every single other thing besides Julian that they had changed because of Flashpoint just wasn't that, wasn't that good. They could have went bigger, but that's alright. I think what they did was alright enough, and the rest of the season was amazing. But speaking of that, we're like halfway through the season now at this point, right? Oh, only the first 2 episodes? I gotta speed this up. So anyway, now I just want to talk about Jay Garrick in this season of The Flash. I think that this character fits the actor's frequency on the show better, because as Henry Allen, I just didn't buy into the fact that he was on the show such a little amount, especially last season when he got out of prison and he decided, no, I'm not going to spend time with my son who I haven't seen in 15 years. I'm going to go off in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, in the woods somewhere. That didn't make any sense to me, and of course, that was probably just, like I said in my Season 2 video, that was just a outside factors thing that the actor, can't be on the show that often, but it just didn't make sense in the world of the show why he wouldn't show up, so I think that as Jay Garrick, it makes a lot more sense why he's on the show so little, because he's from another Earth, doing his own Flash stuff on another Earth, so I think that makes much more sense for his frequency on the show. I also really like seeing him as his mentor for Barry. I thought that was really cool to see. But moving on to Jessie Quick has powers. She's a speedster now. That was really cool to see. Of course, Wally also gets powers. Alchemy and Savitar give it to him, which I thought was also cool to see Wally become Kid Flash. And I like seeing Wally and Jessie's relationship in this show, in this season. I think they did a good job developing them as a couple this season, which there were a lot of couples this season, and I think they all were great. Like, obviously, Barry and Iris, come on. They're great. They're a cute couple. I love them. We also have Julian and Caitlyn. Thought they were great. Joe and Cecile, amazing. I love seeing Joe so happy. They also have Cisco and Gypsy, which I think was also, I think they were a great couple too.
I'll marry that woman.
They just did a really good job with all the couples this season. And we got introduced to another Harrison Wells this season. They call him HR. And I really liked his character. I think that it's just so cool seeing this actor being able to play so many different versions of the same character, but completely differently. Like, the Harrison Wells from Season 1 is so different from the one from Season 2, and they're both so different from the one this season. It's just so crazy. Like, it's so crazy how this guy, in some cases can play 2 versions of Harrison Wells in the same scene and make them seem so different from each other. Like
what? Like the fact that I'm a genius and you're a moron.
It's crazy. And I love that they really lean into the weirdness of another Earth, of, having a character be from an alternate universe, and just the different, how different that Earth is. Like how, movies are named differently, and they're about different things in that world, and people who are one thing on this Earth are a completely different thing on the other Earth. It's just, I just love that they lean so much into the weirdness, the differences of Earth 1 and Earth 19. And so, I liked exploring that, and they obviously have him sacrifice himself at the end of the season to save Iris, which I'll get to in a second, but I thought that was a good way to have him die, and I think that, you know, throughout the season, he's kind of trying to figure out his purpose on the team, and he finally figures it out at the end that he's on the team to sacrifice himself and save Iris. So I thought that they did that very well, his sacrifice. But moving on to another difference in this new timeline that I forgot to mention is Caitlyn has Killer Frost powers now. So throughout the season, Caitlyn is battling between her own personality and her Killer Frost personality. And at different points throughout the season, both kind of take control and kind of go back and forth. You know, for a little bit it's Caitlyn, then it's Killer Frost, then it's back to Caitlyn, then it's back to Killer Frost. And I like seeing that kind of slow transition throughout the season, and it ending with her becoming someone else. Something else. It's a Arrow thing. By the end of it, she's neither Caitlyn nor Killer Frost. So I'm very interested to see where that goes, you know, what she is now, and how they kind of continue to develop her character. I'm very excited to see where that goes. But our main villain this season is Savitar, the god of speed, trapped in the Speed Force by Barry in the future, trying to get out now, getting power from the Philosopher's Stone, as I mentioned earlier, kind of a Harry Potter reference, sort of. And so Team Flash decides to, you know, in order to stop Savitar, they need to throw the Philosopher's Stone into the Speed Force, and that should, you know, that should stop Savitar. That should leave him powerless, and they will have defeated him. So they take the Philosopher's Stone, Barry throws it into the Speed Force, but then gets thrown into the future, where he sees Savitar kill Iris, and he sees himself watching it happen, trying to run to save her, and not being able to do it, not being fast enough. And this moment kind of sets off the rest of the season, making it about trying to save Iris, trying to figure out ways to change the future, and figuring out ways to make it so Savitar never kills Iris. That, you know, trying to stop that from happening. And I thought that that was a cool way of adding stakes to the season and allowing them to kind of explore interesting ideas of how to save Iris. Barry ends up going to the future at one point, and I like that they, you know, they show it as a very, like, you know, dystopia, and Barry's no longer the Flash. He disbanded Team Flash, and he's just kind of been living alone in Star Labs. I like when they have Barry go to the future, they have him change the future, have, you know, help everybody there, get Team Flash back together, you know, get Barry to be Flash again. I like that they had that happen, and he gets some information of how to save Iris. Future Barry tells him that he had help from this scientist who made this Speed Force weapon that trapped Savitar in the Speed Force. And so when he goes back to the present, he sets out to find this scientist, and she ends up being not what Future Barry said she was just yet. She's a failure, and they end up giving her the confidence to create this weapon earlier, and she ends up having this thing with HR, which I thought that was nice. Again, they do a good job with couples this season. And before HR dies, he makes her part of Team Flash, and so she'll continue to be part of Team Flash moving forward. And then we find out who Savitar is. We find out Savitar is Future Barry. He's a time remnant that Future Barry created, and it's just this kind of time loop thing where Barry creates a time remnant, Savitar lets the time remnant live to become Savitar, to kill Iris, to make Barry make the Time Remnant so that Savitar can save the Time Remnant and he can become Savitar and the loop continues. And I thought that was a really cool reveal. I thought it was really cool to see kind of the perspective of a Time Remnant, because we saw last season that Barry creates a Time Remnant to stop Zoom, and the Time Remnant ends up having to sacrifice himself to stop Zoom. And I think that it's cool to see, like, what if the Time Remnant doesn't die, and now he's not the real Barry, and this ends up, you know, putting him down this road, this dark road, to become a villain. I think that's a really cool concept to explore, and I think they just did a really good job with that reveal, especially because they kind of set it up earlier, where they would talk to Savitar through Julian's body, and he was like, I am the future Flash. And you think there's a comma there, so he's saying, I am the future Flash, you know, because he's talking to Flash, so you think that's kind of what he's saying, but what he's really saying is, I am the future Flash. Which, I thought that was pretty cool. That kind of play on words there, that, you know, it was set up from the beginning, and you just thought he meant one thing, but he meant another. I thought that was cool. That was a nice reveal, and again, just, it's so cool to explore this, you know, this idea of a Time Remnant turning evil, seeing the Time Remnant's perspective of it all. I thought they did a good job with that. Then we get to the moment where Iris dies, and Barry can't save her. Savitar kills Iris, but not really, because then we find out earlier HR came to save Iris, and he ended up using this technology from his Earth that can replicate somebody else's appearance, so, you know, make you look like somebody else. So HR made himself look like Iris, and made Iris look like him, and they switched places, so HR was actually the one who died here. And again, I already talked about his death earlier. I think they did an amazing job with it. I think that's crazy how they can make you care so much about a character's death who has multiple versions, with multiple versions of them around, where it's not really, like, that character's death, like, there's other versions of them that are going to continue on the show, but they make you care so much about this version's death. It's just, it's so crazy that they are able to do that. Again, like I mentioned before, just, you know, how crazy it is that they can make two versions of the same character be so different. Again, that actor does a really good job at that. But since Iris doesn't die, that ends up changing the future so that Savitar never exists. And so because they still need a final showdown between Barry and Savitar, they need to say that, oh, it's going to take some time to catch up to him, the timeline, so, you know, he doesn't disappear immediately. It takes a few hours, and his new plan is that before he disappears, he's going to get Cisco to change the Speed Force Bazooka into something that can put Savitar into all of time, be there at every single moment, and rule all of time. And so obviously they can't have that, so Barry and Savitar have this big showdown with Wally and Jay Garrick, who was actually trapped in the Speed Force before. They get him out to fight Savitar, which I thought that was really cool to see 4 speedsters fighting each other, 3 against 1. I thought that was cool. I think I would have liked if they had Jessie Quick come also for this, but they didn't have her show up. But I think that would have been cool if they did that. But they get to this point where Savitar is about to kill Barry, and Iris shoots him right before the timeline catches up to him, and he disappears anyway, which kind of seems like, oh, so you just have to wait a few seconds and he would have died anyway. Okay. But Iris kills Savitar, which is definitely going to have repercussions next season of her being like, oh my god, I can't believe I killed Savitar, I killed future Barry, blah blah blah. Because, you know, this Arrowverse loves to have people, you know, really beat themselves up about killing people. Like, the guy was about to kill somebody else. Like, it just seems like it's not that big of a deal. Like, same thing with Diggle in season 4 of Arrow. Like, he killed his brother. But his brother was gonna go after his wife and daughter. Like, it's not that big of a deal. So, yeah, so she's definitely going to have some issues with that next season, and that's probably going to be one of her main motivations for whatever she does. So, we'll see what happens. But then we get to the final moments of the season, which, of course, they're amazing because Flash season endings are always amazing, and we see that because Jay Garrick left the Speed Force is now very angry and needs a prisoner, and so Barry decides he'll go into the Speed Force, and he'll leave Wally to be Central City's Flash, and he goes into the Speed Force with his mother, or the Speed Force in the form of his mother, and that's where the season ends. He says goodbye to everybody, goes into the Speed Force, and that's a nice ending. I wish it was the ending for the entire series and not just the season finale, because I think that it's a nice ending for his character, but of course I know that there's 3 more seasons of this, or 4 more seasons of this, because they're currently on season 7, so I think that this works very well as a series finale, but not really as much as a season finale. Like, I don't know why both Arrow and Flash felt like they needed to have very satisfying endings in their 3rd seasons, and then continue afterwards. I think that both of them, I don't know, like, I don't know if there's something like after 3 seasons, it needs to get renewed. Maybe that's how the CW shows work. Like, they only have a 3-season contract, and then they figure it out after, so maybe that's why they do that, but I don't know. It seemed very weird that they had this satisfying ending. Both Arrow in season 3 and now Flash in its 3rd season, they both had very satisfying endings and had to rewrite it in their 4th seasons to explain why it's going to keep going. But I'm excited to see where season 4 goes. Nevertheless, how they explain how Barry gets out of the Speed Force. I think it's going to be very exciting. Can't wait. But those are all my thoughts on season 3 of The Flash. Please comment below your thoughts on it, and remember to give this video a like, subscribing to the channel, and maybe check out some of my other videos. And with that said, that's a wrap.